Okay, everyone, welcome back for the final two presentations we have scheduled today. Before we start, there was a gentleman that we forgot to acknowledge on the last awards. We have Bernie Reichard, who's been a member of Hockey Manitoba since there's a bit of a debate on the year, whether it's 93 or 94, but the Sport Manitoba records he started in 1994 with Hockey Manitoba. Unfortunately, due to COVID and not having any in-person meetings of large gatherings there, we didn't have the opportunity to congratulate Bernie on making it to his 25th anniversary with Hockey Manitoba. Next year will actually be his 30th anniversary with Hockey Manitoba. So, Bernie's been involved in all aspects of our program, certainly leading our as the Director of Development, looking after all of our development our development programs and providing his knowledge and expertise and pointing in the right direction. So if Bernie could just come up, we can acknowledge him. And we have a plaque here in recognition of 25 years of dedication and commitment to Hockey Manitoba, 1994 to 2019, presented by Hockey Manitoba. So congratulations, Bernie.
Thank you, Peter.
Should we get a picture with Bert? Tell Bert to go with it.
Okay, yep.
Okay, just moving right along there, we have Val Caldwell here. Val's a little disappointed that she had to present now right after lunch there because there's a lot of tryptophan in everyone's body and she thinks that people are going to fall asleep. But I can guarantee that she's full of energy, excitement, dealing with a topic that's very topical, certainly with our communities and applicable to our culture of our sport with the social media. That's certainly exploded over the last number of years, certainly with TikTok. You're taking a picture of the sign, not my face. Oh, I'm so disappointed. So without any further delay, and Val, I know, has a great deal of experience in this particular area and deals with all types of industries, certainly involved in the school systems and working with the youth in our province. And this is an area that is very, very important, I think. And you know how some things happen in social media, and we've all gone through that. Certainly the last year with the Hockey Canada issues and that I certainly experienced that firsthand. But without any delay, I'd just like to introduce Val Caldwell.
Thanks, Peter. Good afternoon. How is everyone? Oh, wow. Can we try that again? How is everyone? It's a little better. See, this was my fear, Peter. This is what I told you. Everyone's in a food coma. So we are going to spend the next hour and a half having some pretty in-depth discussion about social media, kids, how it affects them, what we can do as hockey organizations across the province to support our youth. Some of the things that we're going to talk about are going to be pretty heavy. So when I do presentations, I don't hold back in terms of I share stories. I share personal experiences that I've had with youth across the province. So at any time, if any of this is too heavy for anybody, you can certainly just take a step outside. And I recognize that there may be some people here who may be directly connected to a couple of the stories that I do share. We are geographically a very large province, but in terms of human connection, we're pretty small. So my intention this afternoon is not to upset anyone, but it's to talk about the realities that are facing our kids and provide you with some tips and tools to try to keep them safe. So hopefully infuse a little bit of humor in along the way, so it's not going to be all doom and gloom. I am going to get you to participate a little bit, so if you have your cell phones, I would like you to have them out. I do know the difference between participating in what we're doing and scrolling through Instagram, so I will know if you're actually paying attention or if you're just scrolling your social media. If you are an Android user, I apologize. I don't have an Android phone. So you'll have to, as we do the settings and things, it'll be through iPhone. And if you're an Android user, you'll have to figure it out on your own. So I apologize for that. So I just want to start by acknowledging those two pictures. That is a couple pictures of my dad, my favorite hockey player, playing hockey way back in the day. And he's the one that's about to score the goal. So as you can see, obviously, my dad played hockey long before we had a lot of safety equipment for people to play hockey. So I just wanted to acknowledge that as we begin. I'm not going to do a huge introduction. I've been doing these types of presentations for 16 years now, so I've been around a long time. It initially started through my work with Child and Family Services of Western Manitoba. So based out of Brandon, but I did a lot of the rural work. And so through my years of doing presentations and working with families and youth, we just started to identify so many issues surrounding technology and kids and the internet. And so it all sort of started with developing presentations for parents and adults to keep kids safe, and then it sort of moved into keeping or presentations to teach kids how to stay safe, and then it sort of expanded from there into the hockey world. So as you can see, I have been a hockey fan my whole life. Didn't really understand how to put equipment on probably when I was younger, but I definitely have a passion for the sport of hockey. I was approached last summer by the Yellowhead Hockey Association. So Yellowhead was looking to develop their players in a way that it's not just about developing them on the ice, but also developing them off the ice, and focusing on ways that we can support athletes and support young kids that are playing hockey. And so they had asked me if I would be willing to do some work with their AAA organization. So I did presentations for both the U18 and the U15 teams. And then we also did parent and coach evenings as well that coincided with the presentations for the youth. So I was approached a couple months after doing that from a different organization, a little aggressively, I might add, and they said, "Why does Yellowhead get everything? Like, why did you go to Yellowhead and nowhere else?" So I just smiled and said, "Because they asked." Like, that's the simplest answer, right? Yellowhead was progressive and asked. So that sort of got into a conversation about Peter and Hockey Manitoba, and then fast forward a year, and here I am. So I'm very pleased to be here today. I would like to do this very informally, so I'd like to encourage questions. If you have questions, you can ask them throughout the presentation, or you can come up and ask the questions afterward as well. So I don't see microphones around, but there's for them to ask questions. Have you been doing it interactively, Peter, or? No? Okay, well, we will. So if you have any questions, feel free to shout them out as we roll along. So how does social media affect sports like hockey, or any sport that our kids are playing for that matter? Do you think that the way a person behaves on social media can potentially affect the future of our youth today? If you look at the statistics across Canada, even employers, the most recent one I read said 70% of all Canadian employers have rejected someone based on what they find when they search them up online, right? When they look at what their digital footprint is. So how we behave, how we interact. So social media dangers have increased exponentially, obviously, over the last few years, and I have seen it since COVID. The issues that I'm now dealing with are starting younger and younger. So we're seeing kids now, when I'm visiting a school, I would typically do grade 5 to grade 12 presentations, and I now have principals asking for as young as grade 3. So we are seeing more and more issues with kids in elementary schools. I do think a lot of that had to do with COVID. I think a lot of it had to do with providing devices for younger and younger kids during the time when kids were at home and isolated and were learning online. So we're definitely seeing more significant issues at a younger and younger age across the province. So what does the term digital footprint mean? How many of you have heard that term before? Okay, so basically what it is everything that you leave behind whenever you interact on a device or on social media, whether you're Googling something, whether you're looking up an ad, whether you're posting something, whether you're interacting with someone else's social media, but it leaves a digital footprint behind. And I'm gonna guess that everyone in this room has some form of a digital footprint. So just by raising your hand, how many of you have Facebook? That's because you're old, okay? Because kids tell me only old people like me use Facebook. But now, interestingly enough, high school kids are back on Facebook, and it's all about Facebook Marketplace. So they're coming back around again. How many of you have Instagram? Okay. How many of you have TikTok? How many of you have wasted more than 5 hours of your life a day watching TikTok some days? How many of you have Snapchat? How many of you have Snapchat because your kids have Snapchat? Perfect. How many of you have Be Real? Who said, oh yeah, super enthusiastically? I need to know, because if the Be Real notification goes off, I don't want to be in your Be Real. So let's just talk about that for a minute. I don't mind having my picture taken when I do a presentation. I do mind when I'm above you, because this angle in my 50s is not really working so well. So if you want to take a picture, please stand up. And if I'm going to be in your Be Real, you're going to be in mine as well, right? So obviously, a lot of us, if not most of us, are using some form of social media. And hopefully, if you are parents, you're using whatever your kids are using, right? So that's one of my biggest recommendations. You play in the playground kids are playing in. So the only way to keep them safe is to actually understand how these apps and things work. So social media, the heel of your social media is of your digital footprint rather, is that social media piece, right? That's typically where people leave the most information behind, especially kids, because they're on this stuff all the time, right? They're always posting and sharing and Snapchatting and doing all the things that kids do. So when I speak with kids, especially grade 11 and grade 12, I do a lot of work helping older kids get ready for applying for scholarships, looking at sports teams, those types of things, right? We want them to have opportunities based on a positive reflection of who they are. I don't want to see kids lose opportunities because they did something when they were 13, right? And that's still part of their digital footprint. Because the reality is everything that we do stays there, right? And it leaves a trace behind. So I did a real quick 5-minute search, and I just simply put in how social media has negatively impacted hockey players across Canada. And as you can see, there was a number of articles that came up. And some of you will be familiar with all of them, some of you will be familiar with some of them, but we certainly do know that we're seeing an impact in terms of people's behavior, right? Things that people are doing online and how it is potentially affecting and impacting them going forward. So my goal when I work with kids is I really want kids to have the best opportunities they can. Kids are going to make mistakes. And every one of us in this room has to acknowledge that, right? Are you not all glad that every one of you grew up before the internet? See, at my age, my friends will say, remember when you, and I just smile and say, didn't happen. There's no photographic evidence, right? Plausible deniability. We're the last generation that has plausible deniability because in today's world, everybody puts everything online. So for these kids, right, they're young, they're immature, they're making impulsive decisions. The prefrontal cortex of the brain is the last part to develop, and it doesn't even start developing till early to mid-teens, doesn't finish till mid to late 20s. So we're giving kids a loaded gun at 10 years old and just hoping that they don't make mistakes. Right? We hand them the world, and they have the ability to do all of these things, which technology is amazing, and social media is a great way to keep in touch. But how do we protect them and make sure that the decisions that they're making at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 are not going to negatively impact them when they are young adults looking to start their futures? So everything that you post becomes part of your personal brand. So how do you want to be known? How many of you in this room are familiar with your digital footprint? How many of you would be worried if I told you that I looked up 5 of you and I have all your personal information that's in the next slide? Anybody worried? I'm pretty good at it. I'm just kidding. I don't have a slide with your personal information. But how many of you are aware of what your digital footprint looks like? How many of you have ever searched yourself up? Because putting your name in a Google search is not your digital footprint, right? Do you have proper privacy settings? I had a woman challenge me at a parent night and say, you can't find a single thing about me because my privacy settings are really good. And she was right. Hers were really good. You know whose were terrible? Her mom's. And her mom posts a lot of stuff, and she posts a lot of pictures of her. And so I said to her, it was like 2 minutes of a search, and I said, you had your birthday on Sunday, you were at your mom's house, you had a cake from Safeway, there were 7 people there, because her mom had no privacy settings. And when I see kids lose opportunities, quite often it's not something they have done or something they have posted, it's something someone else tagged them in. And if you don't have your settings set properly, then your name now becomes part of whatever that person has posted. So you can't control what another person posts. You can control if you want your name attached to it. And if your name is attached to it, then it becomes part of your digital footprint. So here's what I would like you to do. I would like you to take your phones out, and I want you to look yourself up. Now, if I just put Valerie Caldwell in half a second, there's 7 million hits, which have nothing to do with me because it's Valerie and Caldwell from the whole world. So I would put Valerie Caldwell Bridging the Gap presentation. So what I'd like you to do is your first and last name. You can start with the community where you live or the community you come from. Then you would expand it to your first and last name and whatever hockey association that you're affiliated with, or Manitoba 4-H, or whatever it is that you're affiliated with. Once you do that, you also want to Google image, right? So not just Google search, but you also want to click image to see if pictures are coming up of you. Then you want to put your names as they appear on social media. So my name on Facebook is not Valerie Caldwell. So I would put my name in as it appears on Facebook. Whatever your Instagram handle is, whatever your X handle is, right? For the old Twitter people in the room. So start to put personal identifiable information in a Google search and see if you can find anything that's actually you. How many of you are finding yourselves already? Did anyone find anything they were surprised by? If you are finding pictures from Facebook, Instagram, those should not come up in a Google search if your settings are set properly. So if your settings are not set properly, then if you're seeing pictures and stuff coming up from social media, you need to adjust your settings. If your friends' settings are terrible and you're interacting with their accounts, then you're going to start seeing information about yourself coming up again through your friends, through the posts and things that your friends have posted. So this is one of the things that I teach kids from a young age, right? Be aware of your digital footprint. Know what it looks like. Because if you come in to work for my organization or your organization, or they want to play hockey somewhere, or they want to get a job at some point in their life or get a scholarship, digital footprints matter. And especially at a higher level of hockey, right? People are looking at these kids, and we are seeing more and more negative impacts on kids and their futures based on negative things that come up through social media. Okay, now I'm going to tell you to put all your phones away again for now. So you're all just deep diving in your own digital footprint. We can do that later. So how do we clean it up? So if we come across something and we think, oh, I don't like that, I don't want that on there, I'd like to remove that, there are ways that you can do that. First and foremost, we want to be careful with what we post. Now, that seems easier than it actually is, because a lot of times people are upset or they're emotional and they post something in the heat of the moment, right? So for example, someone's kid gets cut from your hockey team and they disagree with your decision, and so they decide to take it to their social media, right? And before you know it, there's a post about you and your organization and your coaches and what they think of you, and all of a sudden there's 40 comments below it and everyone's sharing it, and before you know it, there's a lot of negative stuff out there. Now that person probably, if cooler heads were to prevail, wouldn't have posted it. But in the heat of the moment, people say and do things they regret, right? How many of you have ever had a parent, how many coaches in the room? How many of you have ever had a parent who did not respect the 24-hour rule and came to you immediately after a game? Now, probably they said things that were a little offensive, a little upsetting, right? They wouldn't have said those had they had time to actually think about it. So when I speak with kids, of course, we want to encourage them to be careful with what they post on social media. A lot of times they think, but I'm sending it through Snapchat, it's private, it disappears, people can't see it. We really need to understand how this information flows, right, and how these apps work. The next one is removing negative content. So if you do see something, or kids see something, you can contact the site itself. You can ask to have information removed if it's something that you feel is inappropriate or isn't reflecting you in the right light. Certainly if it's something that is negative content about you that someone else has shared or posted, you can try and have those things removed. You can also tighten up your privacy settings. So how many of you have Facebook again? How many of you are confident those sites are set properly so that all your information is just stored within your little Facebook page and nobody else can see it? Some of you probably were 20 minutes ago, but maybe not so much now, right? So Facebook is a nightmare to set. It usually takes about 40 minutes to set a Facebook properly. There's a lot of subtle privacy settings that most people don't realize are there. And now that Instagram is owned by the same company as Facebook, Instagram is also getting more complicated as well. So it's taking time to go through those accounts, make sure they're set. And then setting privacy is not a one-time thing, right? You don't just lock your windows and doors once a week. You lock them every night. So you have to go back and you have to check things. If your phone updates, if the app updates, it's always a good idea to go back and check those things because they can change. What about tagging? How many of you are pretty confident, let's say on Instagram, that you have the settings set properly so that I can't tag you in a photo? Do you want to find out if your settings are set properly? Okay, so for those of you on Instagram, go on your phone, open your app of Instagram. If you don't have Instagram, that's okay, you can just play along. Go into where your profile page is, so where all your posts are. On the top right-hand side, you're going to see 3 bars. Is everybody there? Okay, click on the 3 bars. That's going to open your privacy. So at the very top, it's going to say Settings and Privacy. You want to click on Settings and Privacy. I love that the cameraman is also doing this. That just brings me such great joy. Sorry, I had to call you out there. So scroll down until you see tags and mentions. It's probably like 2/3 of the way down the page. On the very top, it says who can tag you. What does yours say? Allow tags from everyone. So that means everyone in the world can tag you. So basically, you go to a party, you're a 15-year-old AAA hockey player, you're hoping to go somewhere with your hockey career, somebody snaps a bunch of pictures of you, you're drunk, there's alcohol, maybe some drugs in the background. They post those pictures, they tag you in them. If your settings are not set properly, that picture is now part of your digital footprint. Fast forward a couple years, scouts are looking you up, right? Colleges, universities, they're looking you up, those pictures are there. So that one should say allow tags from people that you follow or don't allow tags at all. So that's a personal choice, but I really recommend that it doesn't say allow tags from everyone. Underneath that, it's going to say manually approve tags. Is it on or off? Okay, so turn it on. So then from that point forward, you get home and it says Val Caldwell tagged you in a post. You get to say yes or no. So again, you cannot control what someone else posts, but you can control if you want your name associated with it. So if you have that turned on, then you control whether your name is there or whether your name isn't. It's the same as who can mention you. So mentions on Instagram are the same as a tag, right? So you say, I'm at the Hockey Manitoba provincial conference with @Val Caldwell, right? So again, I recommend that's either people you follow or don't allow mentions at all. So that's just a very quick example of 2 settings that can significantly impact what someone's digital footprint looks like. So when I visited Yellowhead, and I've also done a couple hockey associations since then, this is some of the things that I do with the kids. So we walk through their privacy, we walk through the settings. Let's make sure their accounts are set properly. Let's make sure they're in control of where their content goes, because that's my ultimate goal. I would love to go out and talk to every kid out there and just say, yep, from now on, they're never gonna make a mistake and they're never gonna post anything inappropriate, but we know that they're kids and we know everyone in this room did things that you are grateful there's no photographic evidence of. So the reality is, my role, my hope is to provide the tools to keep them safe. So that's an example of a couple settings. So we're going to put our phones back away again, because look at you all. You're like a bunch of teenagers. As soon as I go on your phone, it's like herding cats to get you back off them. So there's so many sites and so many settings, and it's very complicated, and it's really hard to know which ones, how to set which ones. It takes some time. They're always changing. There's always something new. Every time I go to a school and I visit a group of kids, by 12 months later when I'm back in the school, there's so many things that have changed because settings and privacy and apps and things are changing constantly for these kids. So how many of you read the fine print? So before you add an app, you all read the 28-page disclaimer, right? You go through it, you make sure that. No, probably most of you, if not all of you, don't read it. The reality is we add so many things to our devices, and we do not realize how does this interact with me? How does my information get shared? Have any of you ever had Googled something and then you start getting ads for it on your social media and you're thinking like, why? This is magic. Or you have a conversation with someone, right? You're not even Googling it and all of a sudden these ads are coming up. You and your spouse are saying, oh, let's take a trip to the Bahamas. And then every second ad on Facebook is discount flights to the Bahamas. So how does all that work? So what I'd like you to do is open up those settings on your phone. So this is where the Androiders, you're on your own. So for Apple users, which hopefully most of you are, open up the settings, and I'd like you to scroll down until you find the app Facebook. I'm selecting Facebook because most of you said that you're on it. If you're not on Facebook, you can select a different app. So click on Facebook. So go into settings, find Facebook, click on Facebook. Is everybody there? Are you an Androider in the front row here? Is that why you're not there yet? You're just slow. Okay. All right, so settings, Facebook, it'll open a page with a bunch of information on it. Are we all there? Okay, so mine might look a little different than yours. It depends how recently your app or your phone has updated, so mine might be a little bit different. On the top of mine, it says location. So does yours say location? And what does it say? Okay, so is there a reason Facebook needs to know your location? Is there any component of the app that works by your location? So my recommendation is never. Unless you're using Facebook Marketplace and you want to target a specific area, that might be the only time I could think of why Facebook may need to know your location. But if it's not a component of it, like a map, like Snapchat, I would recommend turning it off. The next one is calendars. How many of you have that turned on? So if your calendar is turned on, then that basically means the app of Facebook has access to all the information in your phone in your calendar. So when your kids' hockey games are, when your hair appointments are. So personally, I don't really feel that Facebook needs to notify me when I have a hair appointment. So I choose to turn those off. The next one is photos. That's going to be up to you. If you want to upload photos onto your Facebook, you're going to need to allow it access to your photos, right? So that one is like how you want to personally use it. Underneath that is Bluetooth. So I've turned my Bluetooth off. I don't generally drive down the highway and check Facebook through Bluetooth, so I don't really see a reason why I would need to be on Facebook with my Bluetooth. Same with local network. I don't need Facebook constantly reaching out to try to connect me with local networks, and so I have that turned off. Microphone and camera. So remember when I just asked you how many of you have had a conversation and then all of a sudden ads are popping up on Facebook for the conversation you just had? It's because your microphone's turned on, right? So is it beyond the realm of possibility that someone could be listening through the microphone on your device? So obviously my recommendation is to turn those off. I use Facebook Messenger to FaceTime my in-laws in Britain. Those are different settings. So if you turn off your microphone and your camera on Facebook, you can still leave them on for Messenger if you use it for connecting or FaceTiming. But I don't know, unless you're going to go Facebook Live, there really is no reason why you would need a microphone or a camera turned on. Okay, the next one is Siri and search. So I'd like you to click on that. It's going to open a secondary page. I'm going to guess that they're all turned on, right? So go back to Googling something and the information comes up on social media or having a conversation. So basically what those are doing, it's learning from you and everything that you're doing on there, and then it's sharing that data and that information with all the search engines that are out there, Google and Siri and everything else that has access to us. So my recommendation is turn all of those off. I don't see why what I look at it on Facebook or who I message with really needs to be shared on a global scale with a bunch of different companies and search engines, right? So I recommend going through and turning all of those off. It will not change how your app works. It'll still work the exact same way. It just means you can keep your information a little more personal. I hate to tell you this, but Siri and Search is now attached to every single app on your phone. So every app that you've added will now have Siri and Search all turned on, and you have to go in on each individual app and turn them off. So there's no one setting to just turn it off. It's every individual app. You have to go through this process. Not right now, by the way. The next one is notifications. That's up to you. If you want a banner coming across your phone every time you have a Facebook notification, that's a personal choice. Background app refresh. If you can turn it off, turn it off. It really does not affect how your app works. It just checks it every 10 to 15 seconds in the background, and it's basically just eating your battery for no real reason. So if you can turn it off, I recommend turning it off. Cellular data. Obviously, if you're somewhere that doesn't have Wi-Fi and you want to check your Facebook, you need to leave that one on. And then the very bottom of mine says allow tracking, which obviously I would recommend turning off so that the app of Facebook is not tracking us 24/7. So that's just an example of one app, one group of settings, right? So what did that take us? A couple minutes to do? It doesn't take that long. If you're a coach or a hockey parent in this room, you probably travel a lot, so there's lots of time where you can, if you're not driving, be on your phone and change some of these apps. But you really do have to go through app by app, setting by setting, and understand how this stuff works and how our information gets out there, right? So again, this is something that I do with kids as well, just to try to get them to understand the importance of making sure that those doors and windows are locked. Okay, let's put our phones back down. I feel like I'm your mom and I'm taking your phone away from you. Okay, so what does it mean to DM someone? What does the term DM mean on social media? Direct message. Okay, so which apps have a feature of direct messaging on them? Pretty much all of them, right? So Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, gaming sites for sure. Are you all familiar with Discord? Discord it's basically typically associated with gamers. It's a site that allows people to have communications. It's a chat, basically a chat app. There's lots of different conversations that you can have, but they do definitely have a feature where people can direct message or communicate with kids who they're not connected with. So One of the biggest issues that I see with kids now, and this is starting in kids in grade 5, when I am in a classroom and I ask those kids who are on social media, starting in grade 4, sometimes in grade 5, how many of them have any of these apps out there, right? We go through the apps. And then I ask them to put their hands up if they've ever received a direct message from someone they do not know. You want to guess how many hands stay up? Pretty much all of them. And then when I ask them, how many of you have received a message from someone you don't know that contains some form of content that made you uncomfortable, upset, or was concerning? You want to guess how many hands stay up? Pretty much all of them. Then the next question I ask is, how many of you have talked to a trusted adult about what you saw or what you received? Now tell me how many hands stay up. Okay, so that's something we're going to talk about in a few minutes. Here's the reality about social media. There are so many predators that are on social media because that's where kids are, right? Predators go where there's prey. And that's a very crass way to say it, but that's the reality. Where are all of our kids now, right? It's not somebody hiding behind a tree on a playground anymore. They're in Snapchat and Instagram and TikTok and Twitter and Be Real and all the other apps that kids are accessing because they know that that's where kids are. With AI now and with all these different filters, it's so easy for somebody to become somebody else through social media, right? And we do have a number of kids who have been having conversations with people that they thought were adults that turns out later, or kids rather, it turns out later they realize that they are in fact adults and not kids. So this is an example of a message that my daughter received. So you can see on the right-hand side, that is the image of the obviously clearly older adult male who is offering to pay my daughter money if they can just be friends online and have conversations, right? So these types of messages are out there. Lots of times they will show themselves as adults, right? They will show the kids that they are adults. You can see the offer in there to provide money if she provides some kind of friendship or relationship. Some of them are a little more, they come across as kids, right? So this is an example of one where you think you're talking to a teenager, but it's not a teenager. It's so easy. I mean, I'm a 52-year-old female who could very easily be a 12-year-old boy on social media. I just need a profile picture that makes me look like a boy, right? Pictures don't make profiles real. So it's really easy for predators to connect with kids and pretend that they are other kids. So this is one of the most significant issues that I deal with in terms of where things go really bad for kids online. A lot of kids, especially those of us, how many of you are in rural communities here? Right, so a lot of us come from smaller rural communities. How many of you know where Canton, Manitoba is? That's where I'm from. So it's not a very big, well, I'm from Brandon, but that's where I live now, married a farmer. Didn't think that one through. The reality is, in our small rural communities, and even in our larger centers, there are kids who just don't fit in there, right? They don't meet the people that they're connected with. But it's so easy to meet somebody online and to make friends. And so, you know, we talk to kids, obviously, we say don't add people you don't know. But how many of you, if you were a kid in today's world, would add someone you don't know, right? Because even though you know the risk, the reward of making a new friend seems far greater somehow in an adolescent mind. So kids need to be prepared to understand that sometimes these people that they're going to add are not necessarily who they think they are. Finding random friends on apps like Snapchat is so easy. Do you guys know what Quick Add is on Snapchat? So basically, if you and I snap and you two snap, you're going to come up as someone I should know on my Quick Add because we have you in common, right? So it's the same as Facebook. So kids will sometimes get friends that will add them, and it'll say you have 3+ mutual friends in common. So then kids right away think, oh, well, they must be a kid like me because we have friends in common. Or they'll look at a name and think, oh, I think I know this person. So they add them. And again, if we're being honest, sometimes they're just adding them because they're lonely or they're bored and they want to make new friends. So when I am speaking to kids as young as grade 4 and grade 5, all the way through to grade 12, a large number of kids will admit that they add people they don't know. And again, we know the risk, but see, you're looking at it through the lens of an adult. They're looking at it through the lens of a kid. And they're looking at an opportunity to make a new friend. They don't necessarily think of all the things that could go wrong. So this is an example in Brandon last year. In April of 2022, there was a 33-year-old adult male who was posing as a teenager on Snapchat. He had connected with multiple girls across the city of Brandon. He formed a relationship with a 15 and a 13-year-old girl online. Both of those relationships escalated to a point where they were ready to meet in person. Both the 13 and 15-year-old went to the home where the 33-year-old man resided, thinking they were meeting a teenager, both the 13 and 15-year-old girl were sexually assaulted by the 33-year-old male that resided there. We also had a really bad one in Nipawin last year. That individual, I believe, currently there are 88 criminal code charge offenses against that individual. So the sad reality is, for everything good, there's always something bad, right? For all of these apps and all of the positive things and the good things that we can connect with people and have relationships and meet new people, sadly, there always has to be that shadow there, right? And that has become more significant now with the introduction of AI, with the ability to change how someone sounds or how someone looks. So there is some significant concern with kids connecting with people they don't know. So what I'd like to point out to you folks, how many of you are on Snapchat? How many of you are familiar with ghost mode? How many of you are using ghost mode on your Snapchat account? So on Snapchat, there's a feature called the Snap Map. So if you activate the map, it shows you where all your friends are located, right? So you can look on the map, you see where all your friends are, you can see the last time they were active, you can see lots of different information about them. Now, there is a feature called ghost mode, which makes you disappear from the map. So people can look at the map, they no longer see your location or see where you are. There are different ways you can set it. So you can just go completely into ghost mode and you disappear from everyone, or you can select specific people who can see you. So my recommendation with kids is always the same. I believe that every kid that uses Snap Map should have one trusted adult in their life who accesses their location at all times. And it's not about power and control, it's about safety. So when my kids were younger, that was the rule in my house. If you have Snapchat, then I'm your friend. When Snap Map became a feature, then what we negotiated was I see them, they see me, they see each other, nobody else sees them. They are now 22 and 19. Want to guess how their maps are set? The same way. So when I asked Liam at 21 years old why he hadn't blocked me, because I had figured as soon as he moved out he probably would, he just smiled and said, because you never made me feel like I have to. That's the key. Right? It's not about power and control. It's about keeping them safe. So being transparent, having those conversations, but I do always stress that with kids. I'm a big believer. Same with Find My Phone. How many of you use Find My Phone with your kids? Right? And do your kids know that you use it? Yeah, transparency, right? This is just for safety, especially for those of us who live rurally and have to drive, and we're out there in the winter and the roads aren't good. And so the reality is it's explaining, it's having those conversations. What I want to say about ghost mode in terms of what we just talked about, my recommendation to kids is if you are going to add someone and you're not 100% sure you know them, make sure you're in ghost mode. Because what is the first thing a predator will do the second that kid adds them back? They're going to look at the map to see where they are. Right? So all we want is for kids to be safe. Because a lot of times kids will say to me, well, I added this person because I thought I knew them, and then they were some creeper, because that's the word they use, and so then I removed them. But my concern is there's a step in between there, right? In between you adding them back and realizing they're a creeper and removing them is they have time to see your location on a map. So here's the conversation we have with kids. In order to be safe, if you are going to add someone you don't know, just make sure you use ghost mode. It's a simple feature. They can go in and out of it. You can set it different ways. You can be in for 3 hours, 24 hours, but it's an important conversation to have with kids in terms of their safety when they're using apps like Snapchat. So I'm just going to stop and check in and see if there's any questions or anything so far. Not a single question. Everyone's still awake, though, so I'm super happy about that. Peter, you good? You're still awake? Yeah, he's good. Okay. So again, sometimes it's a lot of information, and so if questions come up afterwards, I'll certainly be around after the presentation as well, if anybody wanted to come up and ask any questions along the way. Okay, so we're going to get into the darker stuff here. Who can tell me what is My Eyes Only on Snapchat? Okay, so it's where you can put things behind a passcode that nobody else can see if they don't know the passcode. Now, first of all, let's just acknowledge that a 4-digit passcode is not that difficult to figure out, right? There's a young man that I know that was pretty confident I could never figure out his password. It was a 4-digit passcode. And I very quickly told him what his 4-digit passcode was, and he was shocked, and he said, how do you know that? And I said, because it's the number of your 2 favorite hockey players. It's not rocket science, right? Kids are pretty simple. How many of you adults use your kids' birthdays? Or the day you got married? Or the day you got divorced, depending which day is your favorite day. The reality is, it's so simple to figure out 4-digit passcodes. But beyond that, before we get into this, this is what I want to say. If your child or a child in your life is using My Eyes Only, it does not necessarily mean it's to hide nefarious things from your eyes or someone else's. So please do not go home, grab their phone, look, and if they're using it, throw it in the fish tank and say, we're done, right? Because maybe they just have some things in there that they want to keep private. Do you think that kids have a right to privacy? But do you also agree that all adults in all forms, when we are connected with kids, have a responsibility to keep them safe? And that's a tough line to walk sometimes, right? Because you want to give them some freedom and some autonomy, but at the same time, the ultimate thing is we want to keep them safe. So the reality with My Eyes Only, Snapchat, I wouldn't say is necessarily the safest app out there. And I certainly wouldn't say that if I had a folder called My Eyes Only on an app like Snapchat, I would assume my eyes will be the only one that will ever see them. So how I word it to kids is this: if there's anything in that folder that you would be ashamed of, embarrassed by, or worried would get you in trouble, shouldn't be there. And it shouldn't be anywhere in any form of digital, like any on their devices, in any kind of folders. A diary or a journal is personal. Social media is public. So any of those types of things should not be stored somewhere, even behind a passcode, in a place called My Eyes Only. So I start with My Eyes Only because I do want to make you aware that there are folders out there that are like that. There's secret calculators. I'm sure you've all heard of those, where they appear like an actual calculator and they work like a calculator, but if you put in a secret code, then it opens it up and they hide all their other stuff in there that they don't want people to see. So there's lots of those apps out there, right? And they do have the ability to download them from the App Store and use them. So sometimes kids will do that because they want to keep some things private. So where does my image go when I send it? Now, I've been doing this work for 16 years. And when I first started, we were dealing with, I think, MSN Messenger and Kik and Facebook. Do you guys remember Kik? How many of you have kids old enough that were on Kik? So that was kind of like a kids texting app. Unfortunately, in my family, my son was 12 when he started using Kik. And he was using it just to communicate with some kids. He was playing on a regional hockey team, and so he had kids from different communities that he was just getting to know, so they were all connected through Kik. And then one day he came to us because he had received some content through Kik that was not content that any child should ever have to see. And so at 12 years old, we were obviously very proud of him for coming forward. We had to involve the ICE unit of the RCMP, which is the Internet Child Exploitation Unit, and unfortunately for my son, he got caught up in a pedophile ring and had received images from a pedophile ring. So there was an investigation through the ICE unit. They were never able to determine where the images originated. So this issue is not new in terms of content being shared. But the content being shared between kids is relatively new. So the term that we use is sexting. When I speak with younger kids, I don't use the term sexting. I ask them specific questions, like, has someone ever sent you something that made you feel uncomfortable or unsafe? Or has anyone ever asked you to send something that makes you uncomfortable or unsafe? Some of you are not going to like to hear this, but I start this conversation now in grade 5, and there are reasons why I need to start in grade 5. So we have seen, sadly, the exchanging of sexual images with kids as young as grade 5. Either exchanging or receiving. Now, something you need to understand is your child or the children in your life are only responsible for their own behavior. They're not responsible for anyone else's behavior. They cannot control what they're sent any more than my 12-year-old could control what he was sent, right? So that's the first thing that we need to understand. These images are out there. Kids can be asked for them. You can see the statistics here. When I am in schools and I ask those 2 questions of younger kids, so grade 5 through grade 8, there is an alarming number of hands that go up, that kids will say they have either been asked to send something that they didn't want to send, or they have received something that they did not ask for. So the conversation does have to start younger and obviously age appropriately. But by the time they're older, right, so we're talking your U15 and up hockey teams, your high school kids, they need to have this information, and we need to have these tough conversations with them. So this is a component of what I did speak with Yellowhead organization about last year, and all high school kids across the province that I speak to. So when we talk about sexting, we talk about images of children, right? The term that most people are familiar with is child pornography. There is a move in the criminal code to change that. So they will be going forward called child sexual abuse material, which is technically what it is. But any image of any child under the age of 18 or who appears to be under the age of 18 that is sexual is considered child pornography or child sexual abuse material under the criminal code. Now, I am an advocate for the laws that protect children. And my personal opinion, and you don't have to agree with me, if an adult is harming a child in any way that is related to this, I do not have any issue with how severe these laws are. And in my opinion, they could be more severe. What I do have an issue with is when two 16-year-old kids are trying to figure out their sexuality. They're trying to figure stuff out. And maybe they send an image back and forth. And then something goes wrong. So how do we deal with that when the criminal code is very clear in terms of child sexual abuse material or child pornography? Because the reality is we are seeing kids in middle years who are exchanging images. I had a young girl in grade 12 say to me, Val, I got asked for nudes way more in middle years than I did when I got to high school. So we do know that it's happening. It is not a girl versus boy issue, it is a kid issue. I have seen just as many boys be harassed to send sexualized images as I have seen girls. So quite often we assume that it's boys asking and girls, being harassed to send. It goes both ways. And I've seen it go both ways. So this is not just an issue about boys or girls. This is about kids. Anyone with a phone with the ability to take a picture has the ability to make an impulsive decision. How many of you in this room have ever made an impulsive decision when you weren't thinking clearly? And even when you are thinking clearly, do you still always make the right choice? How many of you have that one last glass of wine and you know you shouldn't because you're going to have a headache in the morning, but you do it anyway, right? So even though we know better doesn't mean that we always do better. So taking a photo of yourself or someone else that is under 18 is under the criminal code considered creation of child pornography. Sending a naked photo of yourself or someone else under 18 is distribution, and keeping a naked photo of yourself or someone else is possession. So those are chargeable offenses under the criminal code to deal with child sexual abuse or child pornography. You can see the definitions here. The one I want to point out is distribution on the bottom. I think it's really important to understand distribution is not always texting or sending, it's also showing. So if a person were to turn their phone around and show images, that is distribution under the criminal code. It is a chargeable offense. So why are we talking about all of this when we're here today talking about kids? The reality is that every one of you that has any kids in your life, whether it's your own personal ones or the ones you're coaching or the ones in your hockey association, these issues that we are discussing, as hard as they are to discuss and as heavy as the material is, are affecting all of our kids. And we're seeing it as young as grade 4 and grade 5. So they are tough conversations that we have to have with kids. And who's having these conversations with kids? I know I am, because I'm traveling all over Manitoba and Saskatchewan, and I'm talking to thousands of kids a year, and I've done it for 16 years, but there isn't a lot of education out there. And so a lot of it is just simply people don't know how to start or have these difficult conversations. I am going to transition into the toughest part of the presentation. I'm going to give you the good news first. You're going to get an extended coffee break because I was expecting more questions. So we're probably not going to take our full hour and a half. So you will get a little bit of an extra coffee break when we're done. Who can explain to me? Well, actually, let's do it this way. Put your hand up if you have heard the term sextortion before. Okay. Put your hand up if you think that sextortion is an issue that affects kids in Manitoba. Okay? And put your hand up if you think it's a significant issue that's affecting youth across the province of Manitoba. So when we think about sextortion, one of the probably most common names most of us in this room will relate to is Amanda Todd. Amanda Todd was one of the first national cases of sextortion. Amanda never did send an image to anyone. She was live chatting with someone. She flashed her naked breasts. It was less than 3 seconds, but the individual was recording the conversation, took a screenshot of her breasts, created a Facebook page, and that's how her harassment started. So back in the day when Amanda Todd, when this first happened, sextortion wasn't something that most people had heard of. And as I travel through the province and I have conversations with parents, it still shocks me how many people have not heard the term sextortion or do not understand how significantly this is impacting kids within our province. Who is the biggest targeted group at risk of sextortion in Manitoba currently? Anybody have a guess? Young males between the ages of? Yeah, close, 11 and 17. So we're seeing them as young as 11 and then obviously all the way up to before they turn 18 years old. So these are some statistics from the Canadian Centre for Child Protection. In July of 2022, they had 322 cases compared to 85 in 21 and 15 in 2019. So that shows you the significant increase in cases that are reported across this province. I recently did a presentation with a member of the ICE unit who was in attendance and gave a presentation after mine, and she was explaining that there's probably 100 cases a month of sextortion within the province of Manitoba. So when we talk about whether it's a significant issue or not, it has become a critically significant issue that is affecting kids in the province. So in 2018, 14% of boys under 13 had viewed pornography. In 2021, 49% of boys had viewed it. What changed? Access, exactly, cell phones. The reality is, I mean, some of you in this room probably had Uncle Bob who had the Playboys hidden behind the toilet in the downstairs bathroom, right? I mean, access to pornographic material when we were young was not like it is today, right? There are sites out there like Pornhub that are easily accessible through a Google search. You don't need a password. You don't need a credit card. It's right there. And so we are seeing now, there was a Canadian study done, 470 adolescents reported 98% of them have been exposed to pornography. The average age of first exposure is 12, some as young as 10. So we do know that we do live in a hypersexualized society, right? There's stuff available to kids now that just simply weren't available in generations past. So I am going to share a story with you today, and I share this story with the permission of this young man's family. And the intention in sharing his story is to hope, his family hopes, that his story will hopefully help other people so that no other family has to experience what their family had to experience. And again, I'm going to say that I apologize if this directly affects anyone in this room. I am sharing his story with the permission of his family. So we are talking about a 17-year-old boy in southwestern Manitoba in February of last year who had met a girl online, who had been communicating, and then exchanged sexual images. She sent a nude, he reciprocated with a nude. Immediately, the demand for money came. He did send money, whatever he had access to. The demand continued and the threats continued. He told his parents that he was going to his grandma's house to water the plants and then would see them at the movie theater in their community later that evening. He didn't show up at the movie theater, so his mom and dad called him and texted him. He was not responding, so they became worried about his safety. It was a really cold night, so dad decided to drive to grandma's farm to see if he could see if everything was okay. Unfortunately, what he found there was his son's lifeless body. So in 3 hours from the exchanging of the image to the paying of money, he was no longer here. And I will never forget getting the phone call the next morning because my friend was the guidance counselor in the school where this happened. And it's heartbreaking because this is my biggest fear, that we're going to lose kids, because we are losing kids. And there's no need for it. He made a mistake, which is something that every kid in our life can do, and every person in this room has done. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection, there's, in terms of the sextortion, there's those stats again, but if you look at the other ones, it's showing us very quickly how this is increasing and how dramatically it's affecting boys. I have my own thoughts on why boys are targeted more than girls. It does not mean that girls are not targeted in terms of sextortion, but it does mean that the more at risk right now are our boys. They are the ones who are being targeted. So obviously, when we have these conversations with kids, the advice is don't do it. That's logical, right? We would all say, please don't send a picture of yourself. And we would think, and sometimes we think as adults, why would you do this? Like, why would you even consider sending this? Do we remember to follow that up with, if you do, here's what you do? Because that's the piece that's missing. They know not to do it. Kids are smart. It's not a lack of intelligence. It's the fact that they're kids. And they're not critical thinkers, right? They're emotional. How many of you are raising a teenager right now? How many of you are convinced that that baby was switched at the hospital? Because there must be something wrong with why is your teenager like this? Why are they so difficult? It's part of adolescence. It's part of growing up, right? They're kids. So they're not always going to get it right. How many of you did things that you knew you shouldn't do, but you still did? Here are the 3 most common things that adults say to kids when they make critical errors, like sending a naked picture. What were you thinking? That's the first one. Well, what did we just decide? They weren't, right? They're not critically thinking in that moment. Emotions are running high. They make an impulsive decision. You know better than that. How many of you in this room will raise your hand and admit that you have said those words to a kid before? You know better than that. Or the last one, how could you be so stupid? Those are the 3 most common things that we say. So folks, I'm going to ask you a question. When I leave the great city of Winnipeg today and I head back to rural Manitoba, what's the speed limit on the highway, on the number 1 highway? 120, okay. 110, right? And so how fast do you folks drive? 119. See, my dad's friend was like one of his best friends when I was young was a police officer. He said, kid, keep it under 10. They'll never ticket you. So some of you drive 119, but let me ask you, why do you do that when you know better than that? What's the speed limit? Now you're just rationalizing your poor choices, right? You know, how could you be so stupid? You know better than that. Do you see how condescending that is? Just because we know better does not mean we do better. So when a kid makes a mistake like this, the worst possible thing we can do is shame and blame. We need to protect. We need to make sure they're okay. We need to provide tools for them to make sure that we can have a conversation with them the next day and they're still going to be there to have that conversation. Just because you know better doesn't mean you do better. And kids are not going to do better all the time. So we need to create environments where kids feel safe to come forward and have these conversations. Remember I said earlier how many kids leave their hands up when I ask when they come to trusted adults with things, when things are going wrong? You want to know the top 5 reasons that they don't? They're right there. And this is coming from tens of thousands of kids that I have spoken to over the years. And the interesting thing is when I ask adults, why don't kids tell you? You know what adults always guess is the first one? Because I'll take their device away. That's not the first thing kids are worried about. The number 1 thing they are worried about is you are going to be disappointed in them. That's what they worry about. That they've disappointed you, that you won't trust them again, right? Number 3 is you'll blame them, because a lot of times we do this, right? We blame them. Whose behavior is your child responsible for? Theirs. They're not responsible for anyone else's, right? So if somebody sends them something or does something, it's not their fault. And number 5 is you'll take their device away. So let's be realistic. Of course, they're concerned about it, but it's not their number 1 concern. They're really worried about disappointing and letting down the adults in their lives. And when I say the adults in their lives, it's not just their parents. It's their coaches. It's their teachers. It's their mentors. It's the people that are in their lives. I truly believe that every one of you in this room that has the opportunity to lead kids, whether it's coaching, whatever it is that you've chosen to do, you're the lucky ones. Because kids are incredible. And you can learn some really awesome things by being a leader of kids. I had the good fortune of directing our high school musical in Hamiota for 4 years. And I'll tell you, some of my greatest memories of my kids' high school years were those 4 years in that high school musical program. Kids are incredible. And having connections and making those connections with kids. Some of you in this room, do you remember, how many of you had a coach that impacted you in a really positive way? How many of you had a coach that impacted you in a really negative way? Right? We have the opportunity every time we work with kids that we can impact them in positive or negative ways. I was a competitive gymnast when I was a kid, and I can tell you, I had one coach that impacted me in incredible positive ways and still stays with me today, and I had a couple that were the complete opposite, and I certainly don't look back at my time with them in a positive way. So this is my advice, and I should have said this in the beginning. If there's anything, if you want a screenshot or anything, you can certainly feel free to take pictures. I'm perfectly fine with that, or you can ask for slides afterwards. When kids are in a situation where they have sent something or they realize that they're being sextorted, the first thing they need to do is immediately stop the conversation. So what happens a lot of times is they'll start to beg, please don't send them, I'll do anything, what do you want, what can I do, how can we make this go away? Nothing is going to make this go away. And begging and pleading is not going to stop it. Do not give in to threats and do not send money. So one of the things as adults that adults can do is do not allow them access to online banking. Give them a good old bank card that they can go to the debit machine and withdraw their money. They don't need a Venmo or a PayPal at 16 years old. So if they don't have access to the money, sometimes they'll be told things like go to the local store and buy gift cards and send them to us, right? So they're going to try whatever they can to get money. Typically with boys, it's money that they're looking for, and with girls, it's typically more images or more material. Not always, but that's typically what we see. So don't give in to threats, don't give in to demands. Keep a copy of everything, and I mean even the uncomfortable stuff. Whatever you've sent, whatever you've said, no matter how embarrassing it may be, because the police need as much as possible to try, if they can, to find these people. Now, the reality is it's not always easy, because these people typically are not in North America. They're in other countries, and it's really hard to find them. One of the new scams they have now, actually, is they'll say to a kid, I don't know why, but my Instagram keeps glitching. Could you create an Instagram account and then just give me the password, and then we can talk there? And so what that does is that traces the IP address back to the victim and not back to the person who's doing it, right? So they're crafty, because they're starting to figure out that sometimes the police can, in fact, trace them through their IP addresses. So now they're trying to get the kids to create separate accounts so that they can't be tracked back, right? So I have the opportunity to work with a lot of RCMP officers, and I'm telling you right now, they want to help kids. That's their goal. They want to protect kids. But kids need to understand they're not there to judge them. So keep all the material, all the stuff that's sent, no matter how uncomfortable it is. And then the most important thing that I always encourage kids to do is reach out, talk to a trusted adult. Make sure that they're asking for help, because this stuff is incredibly overwhelming and it's really hard for kids to know how to handle. So we want to make sure that they reach out, talk to a trusted adult. Never say that it won't happen to me, because life really does have a funny way of proving you wrong. So what I'd like to do is share a couple real quick stories, experiences that I've had post-presentations that I've done with kids. And these are just a couple of testimonials that I want you to see. The first one is from a young man who was sextorted. So you can see in his words, he explains what happened, he explains how he was feeling, but the important part of it is he knew to go to his parents and he asked for help. And that's what we want. It's all about education. It's all about providing tools for kids. So we need to give them the tools ahead of time so that when this happens, because potentially it could happen to all of the kids that you may have in your hockey associations or in your life, we need kids to know it's okay to come forward. If you notice in the third paragraph, he talks about how they took his image and posted it into messages on Instagram sent to AAA hockey associations. Those are some of the things that they do to threaten to get money. So they'll take the naked image and they'll make it look like they're going to send it out to, Hockey Manitoba or AAA hockey associations or colleges, universities, whatever. Typically, they don't send that, because as soon as they send it, then they lose the ability to threaten, right? But what they're doing is they're trying to make the individual feel like they're going to show everybody. This is just a testimonial from that individual's mom, just sort of reiterating again how important it is for education and to know what to do in these situations. Because when a kid has the courage to come forward, the worst possible thing we can do is shame and blame them. Right? We need to praise them. I sent this young man a message the morning after. So I got the phone call at midnight. We kind of worked through everything. The morning after, I sent him a message, and I told him that in my 52 years on this planet, I don't think I've ever been prouder of a kid than I was of him, because he did everything right. He made a mistake. The mistake's done. There's no point in even discussing that. He knew what to do. He had the courage to come forward. He asked for help when he needed it. And the most important part is he's there to read the message the next morning. And that's what matters with these kids. This is just another one from a hockey organization, from a mom. Same thing. I was in their organization. A few months later, their son was sextorted online and once again reached out and had the tools to know what to do. So for me, my goal is always the same. I just want to keep kids safe. I want to provide tools and tips for organizations, for schools, for all adults, for parents. It doesn't matter what our role is, to make sure that we have the tools that we need to keep kids safe. So when you think about a toolbox, we have toolboxes for hockey, right? We make sure that these kids are protected on the ice. They have all the stuff they need. We make sure their equipment is in good shape. We make sure that they have everything on before they go out on the ice. So my perspective is being able to offer some other tips and tools and some other things in their toolbox to keep them just as safe when they're not on the ice. So what can hockey organizations do? My first recommendation is create rules and policies around the use of social media for players and for parents. So how many of you in this room belong to an organization that has already done this? Okay, so there's a few hands going up. I presented this past Thursday to a hockey association, and I was actually quite impressed with the bold move. They sent a message out to all parents who had kids registered in minor hockey and said there is a mandatory parent session happening on Thursday night. If you do not come, one parent in the family, your kid doesn't play here. And I thought that was pretty bold, right? I was a little taken aback by then. I thought, like, maybe, strongly recommend. But they did make it mandatory. And it was interesting because I had a couple parents reach out to me after the presentation and say, like, they were kind of ticked that it was mandatory and they weren't really looking forward to coming. But they actually did feel afterwards that it was something that was beneficial for them. Yeah? So the comment was that, was it a policing organization that shared that with you? That, these are the reports of the ones that we know of, but they do estimate there's probably 3 or 4 times more as many kids who are going through this that don't report or don't come forward. And we know that with everything that goes on with kids, right? Lots of times kids don't bring things forward. But yeah, I think the more we can do to create some policies and stuff around that, the better. I think Hockey Canada is currently working with Kids Help Phone, I believe, and they're developing some things to deal with bullying and those types of things. So I know the more conversation we have, hopefully the better it will be. Here's one of my biggest recommendations. No phones in change rooms. No phones in bathrooms, no phones in change rooms. I have this conversation with schools. There has to be spaces for kids to feel safe. I have had so many stories shared with me from kids who have been like on a toilet in a bathroom and someone is either videotaping or taking pictures above the stall or below the stall. Change rooms, we've had multiple situations where kids have recorded other kids in various stages of undress because that's what we do in a change room, and then they've sent those out or showed them to other people. So I recommend it should be a no phone policy, in my opinion. My daughter is 19 years old, so she had a friend who was trying out for a WHL team, who I will not say which one, but that individual, her friend, was certainly Snapchatting her about 5 minutes before game time. So to me, at all levels of hockey, and this can't start young enough as far as I'm concerned, I think no phone zones in change rooms would be a great idea. You can order these off Amazon. They're a phone bag. You can associate the kid's hockey number with the number on the bag. They can put their phone in when they get to the rink, and then they get it back when they leave. So that would be one of my biggest recommendations. Have areas where kids can feel safe to just be kids and not have to worry about someone else making a Snapchat story or taking a video in a change room. So I was actually, my son, when he played high school hockey, played for an organization. Their goalie was sick, so he just went to be on the bench, basically. And the first thing the manager did was walk up and say, "Can I have your phone? And I'll give it back to you when we're done." So the manager just had a box that all the kids' phones went in when they came to the rink. They got them back when they were done. And that was, well, he's 22 now, so that was, 4 or 5 years ago? I was very impressed by that. I thought that was a really bold move back in the day. Bring in some guest speakers to talk to your associations. There's so many good speakers out there to talk about mental health. There's so many issues that kids are struggling with. And I think it's a great opportunity. Like I said, I went the other night and we had a packed room full of parents that showed up. Now, they had to, but they were there, right? And if mandatory gets them through the door, then mandatory gets them through the door. But I think there's opportunities for hockey associations where we can educate kids, right? Focus on some of the issues that are facing these kids. Because let's face it, if kids are struggling with some of the hard stuff, are you really getting the best out of those kids in terms of their performance for your hockey team? Not if they have a whole bunch of other stuff going on. And we can't get everything. There's no one in this room that can figure everything out and do everything right, but I think there are ways that we can bring in some people to have these conversations. Every kid needs a lighthouse, and you could be that person for one of these kids within your community or your association. And like I said earlier, we all have the stories of the people who impacted us the most. So I would like to thank everyone here for your time. I want to thank Hockey Manitoba for seeing the value in this and bringing me in here. I would also like to thank Yellowhead, not just because it's my region, but because I really do applaud you for aggressively deciding that you wanted to start. And the way it was presented to me was, the initial contact I had from Yellowhead was, we want to develop the best people not just the best players. And I applaud you for that, because I think the more that we can realize that any sport, and especially the one that all of us in this room love, we can do better for these kids. And so I would like to thank you all for your time. If anyone has any questions, certainly feel free to stick around. If not, thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Val. That was, again, excellent presentation, some very useful information. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to participate because I forgot my phone at home today, so maybe one of the lucky ones there. It's very, I know as you went through those exercises, some very disturbing information that came out on how easy it is for people to get caught in a trap like that. Some of us, and not a lot of us, but some of us in the room didn't grow up with any of those pressures because they didn't have social media didn't exist till the last 20 years or so. But I think we've all went through challenges of that in regards to that particular area. It's not going to go disappear, but I think a lot of solutions and a lot of tips there were useful, and make sure that we have that conversation not only with our players, but people that we love in our lives, so to avoid any of those things that could be tragic. So I really appreciate that, Val, coming down there and enlightening us on some of the steps that we can take in order to protect ourselves in regards to social media. Okay, we have one final presentation.